For NewYorkUpstate.com, I am Matt Parrino, and the Buffalo Bills at 2-7 head to East Rutherford, New Jersey, to take on the New York Jets this Sunday at 3-6. AFC East showdown was supposed to be Sam Darnold versus Josh Allen. We may still get one of those guys, but I'm here today to talk to Darryl Slater from NJ.com, who covers the Jets. Darryl, thank you so much for joining me.
Sure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So obviously, the Bills and Jets both made big headlines this last draft here. The Bills with Josh Allen, the Jets with Sam Darnold. First of all, before we get into, how they're playing and how the season's gone, what's the temperature, of the fan base around Sam Darnold? When these guys get drafted, I feel like it's such a high for the organization and the city. But then, some struggles come along the way, and just where's everybody at in New York right now around Sam Darnold?
Well, I think the reasonable fans understand that a rookie quarterback's first year, when you start from the get-go, is going to have hiccups. That happened with Peyton Manning and happened to a degree with Carson Wentz. And so the reasonable fans understand that, and they understand that the Jets have to put some pieces around Sam Darnold, especially in the offensive line, which has been an inconsistent problem. Well, it's been a consistent problem, and it's been inconsistent, the offensive line has this year. So the Jets obviously are not there in terms of the pieces they need to put around Sam Darnold, and the fans understand that. In terms of Darnold's progress, he's done some really nice things. I mean, there were a couple games, I think it was against the Broncos, where he made a fantastic throw down the field for a touchdown, drop the ball right in for Robbie Anderson. But other times where he's made your typical rookie mistakes, whether it's not seeing Kiko Alonso drop into coverage last week in Miami, or forcing a ball on 2nd and 9 from his 16 last week in Miami that resulted in a pick six. He can't make those throws, and a rookie quarterback has to generally learn that the hard way. And Sam Darnold is doing that. He leads the league in interceptions at this point. He's dealing with a foot sprain, so he won't play this week against the Bills. So I think all things considered, people are still reasonably optimistic about Sam Darnold's progress, but they understand there are areas where he has to grow personally and where the Jets kind of have to grow around him in order to get a full and complete answer, which probably won't come for the next year or the year after, about whether he is or is not this team's franchise long-term quarterback.
Mm-hmm. In terms of Josh Allen, I feel the best way to describe the sentiment around him is just the fan base hoping and praying for his return. After he comes in, show some flashes early, obviously some struggles like you talked about, but to see Nathan Peterman continue to throw interceptions, Derek Anderson at 35 years old isn't the quarterback that you want. Especially with this defense in Buffalo playing at the level that it's been playing at. Getting Josh Allen, you saw how good things could be in that Minnesota game on the road. First start on the road, he goes in there and he's got the moxie, he's got the bravado. He's a competitor and he wants to compete. It wasn't always picture perfect in terms of passing, but he showed off his athleticism. 2 touchdowns rushing, one passing in that game. He sits at 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and it looks like we're talking right now on Friday. Sean McDermott just said that ruled out Derek Anderson for Sunday. Didn't want to commit to Nathan Peterman and said basically let's see what happens with Josh Allen. And I think that's the key. This season is at 2-7 about Josh Allen, what he can do, but there's problems around him, and that's what I wanted to ask you next about Sam Darnold in the New York situation. I think there's a lot of similarities. How bad are things on that offensive line in New York and also at the wide receiver position?
Well, the line's pretty bad in Buffalo, right? So
yes.
Maybe not that bad, but so if you go from left to right on this line, Kelvin Beachum is a solid left tackle who's probably nearing or in the twilight of his career. The Jets need to get a long-term solution there at left tackle, so you wonder, will they address that position next year in the draft in the first round? They don't have a second-round pick, remember, because they traded that away to the Colts in order to move up for Sam Darnold. So if the Jets want to get a long-term left tackle, the draft might be the place to do it, because generally you're not getting that in free agency. Maybe use free agency to get a pass rusher like DeMarcus Lawrence. The Jets have a ton of cap space next year, the second most in the league. So typically, you're going to have to draft a left tackle. So, maybe Jonah Williams, the guy from Alabama, a little too early to really iron all that out yet. But the left guard, James Carpenter, he's in the final year of his contract. So he has been inconsistent. Don't be surprised if he's gone. The Jets could wind up with a new left tackle, new left guard next year. Spencer Long, their center, has been problematic this year in terms of shotgun snaps. A lot of that has to do with the fact that he has right middle finger injury, and he snaps the ball with his right hand. So in shotgun, you're just using the one hand, and in Miami, I don't know if you guys saw it, or he probably had 7 or 8 errant snaps that were just disastrous. So he's essentially on a 1-year contract, even though not technically so. I think the Jets feel pretty good about the right side of their offensive line with Brian Winters at right guard and Brandon Shell at right tackle. But the left side could see a significant overhaul. In terms of the weapons around Sam Darnold, the Jets need to get a consistent game-breaking running back. Bilal Powell here, unfortunately, he had a neck injury. He's in the final year of his contract. He's 30 years old. He might not be back. Isaiah Crowell set the franchise rushing record against the Broncos earlier this season, but has had some brutal games. So you wonder about him as a potentially long-term solution. The Jets feel like they have a pretty good number one receiver candidate in Robbie Anderson, who will be a restricted free agent this coming offseason, so expect him to be back on a restricted free agent tender. But in terms of other guys, I mean, Jermaine Kearse, probably not a long-term solution. Quincy Enunwa could be, but he'll be an unrestricted free agent. So the Jets will have to compete for his services next year in free agency if they want to retain him. So a lot of uncertainty around Sam Darnold, and they need to get something more consistent on the offensive line if they're going to be able to establish a consistent running game to help Sam Darnold out for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously, you alluded to it, but big-time issues on the offensive line here in Buffalo. I think I don't think anybody anticipated that it would be this difficult to replace Richie Incognito and Eric Wood. But looking back, hindsight being 2020, it should have been an expectation because this is two Pro Bowl caliber players that they're replacing with Russell Bodine, who basically was considered one of the worst starting centers in the league last year with Cincinnati. And then, Vlad Ducasse, who's kind of been a journeyman, who's struggled himself. Yeah. They seem to be all set at left tackle with Deion Dawkins. He's had his ups and downs this year, but still only his second year. But everywhere, especially on the right side, there could be new players across the board. Wyatt Teller, 5th-round pick last year for the Bills. He could be getting his first start this week against the Jets. He's going to be probably in for Vlad Ducasse, so that'd be interesting to see his progression along the end of the season. But at wide receiver for the Bills, really a lot of nothing. Kelvin Benjamin, unfortunately, has struggled in a contract year for him. The Bills were hoping for big things for him. Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott from the Carolina days, familiar with him, brought him in for a 3rd-round pick. Hasn't really worked out, and they brought in Terrell Pryor, who you guys know a little bit about out in New York, spent the first half of the season out there. And I wanted to ask you about Pryor because Bills fans are going to be wondering if that could potentially be somebody that's here past this season. What was it like, covering him, and a little bit about his time in New York, which was short?
Yeah, I thought he was going to be a guy who could really help the Jets as a red zone weapon, and you saw that he could. I mean, he had a 7-yard touchdown catch and a 20-yard touchdown catch. It was a really nice catch before he got hurt. Of course, 20 being right on the edge of the red zone there. But nonetheless, I thought his big body could really help the Jets in the red zone, and you saw signs and flashes that he just couldn't stay healthy. He had the offseason ankle issue that basically sidelined him for the entire preseason, and then he had a groin injury that was nagging, and the Jets knew it was going to keep him out multiple weeks. As it turned out, it did. And so they decided to cut him and move on. Now, because they waived him with an injury designation, they couldn't re-sign him for 4 weeks. So that's why once he was healthy earlier than that 4-week window, which maybe the Jets overdiagnosed his injury in terms of the time frame. Once he was healthy, he could not re-sign with the Jets at that point. So he wound up in Buffalo. And I think when you cut a guy, a veteran, in that situation, you are, and you don't just wait out the injury. I think you're basically saying you feel like you can live without the guy because he was an intriguing player who brought something to the offense in terms of a big body presence, but kind of a raw, maybe a little bit one-dimensional guy who had one good year in Cleveland, has never been able to build off of that. But a fantastic athlete who will probably stick around the NFL for a little while longer, just because he's such a good athlete and has that size, and that will help keep him around, I think. Now, whether he's going to be a legitimate option for a team in terms of being a 1,000-yard receiver again, I don't think so. But he can certainly be a complimentary receiver.
Mm-hmm. Finally, before I let you get out of here, Darryl, let's talk a little bit about this game Sunday. Anticipating potentially Josh Allen playing should energize this team, and hopefully you can even see it in the defense a little bit. Talking in the locker room with these guys, they're kind of clamoring for him to return because I think that there's just more hope, with the fact that of the skill set that he does have, he's able to do more things, and I think that this defense needs a spark because they've been kind of holding up their end of the bargain all season. But going into this game with Sam out, you're putting Josh McCown in. obviously experienced there, but he's had his struggles at times as well. What do you guys expect with Josh McCown going into the lineup?
Yeah, speaking of Josh Allen's, Todd Bowles this week compared him to Randall Cunningham in terms of that arm. Obviously, he has a fantastic arm, and you said he can do some things that Nathan Peterman obviously can't, which one would hope. With the Jets, they feel like Josh McCown obviously is more advanced than Sam Darnold. He can see things quicker. The offense can move at a quicker rate in some ways than with Sam Darnold, which makes sense. Sam Darnold started 9 games in his career. Josh McCown, I believe, started 73. This will be 74 for him. He's 39 years old. He's been in the NFL since it seems like 1978, actually, 2002. So I feel like the Jets feel like there's certainly some things they can do within the course of their offense quicker with Josh McCown than with Sam Darnold. And look, McCown was the Jets starter last year, remember, too. So he's familiar with this offense, which changed a little bit with Jeremy Bates being the new coordinator this year, but not enormously. So McCown, from that perspective, I don't think there should be major blips. But the one thing to remember is, and a lot of people kind of overlook, is that the Bills have a really good defense. I mean, they're second in DVOA ratings right now. They're last in offensive DVOA ratings. But the fact that they've been, struggled so much and they've been so bad in offense and their quarterback situation has been such a disaster, I think people tend to overlook how good the Bills are defensively. So they could give Josh McCown some trouble, especially because maybe he's rusty, maybe not, but maybe he is because he has not played in the regular season. He played 16 snaps in the preseason. 3 of those were in the opener. Didn't play in the second game in the preseason. Didn't play in the third game. Then played 16 snaps in the third game. So 19 snaps overall in the preseason, 3 in the opener, and 16 in that fourth game, which is just a junk game against backups. So you wonder how crisp he's going to be coming out against what is a very much a legitimate Bills defense.
Definitely. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to being in New York this weekend. Darryl, thank you so much for joining me. But before we get out of here, why don't you tell everybody where they can find your work this Sunday and beyond?
Yeah, of course, nj.com/Jets, and just everything's on there. You'll notice the site looks similar to Matt's site when you go on there because we're under the same kind of corporate umbrella, so the sites will look similar. You'll know your way around in terms of looking at our coverage, and a lot of it's very much Sam Darnold focused, just like all the folks in Buffalo are writing a lot about Josh Allen because, of course, these guys are, for a couple struggling teams, really the beacons of hope potentially going forward. So appreciate you having me on, and have a safe trip down here to New York and enjoy your time here.
Thanks so much. And guys, for all your Bills coverage, as always, keep it locked on NewYorkUpstate.com.